Hey! Hey, you! Yeah, you! Person on the other end of this screen imaging. You remember when I said this?
Now here's the part where you come in. You know how we asked you to send us your Five Nights at Freddy's theories so we could feature them on the channel? Well, now I'm saying you guys should send us your Bendy theories. And we'll piece everyone's together into a video that gives insights only the Treesicle hive mind can think of.
Well, guess what? You did it! Many of you anal ass-kicking peeps sending thoughts, theories, ideas, and questions about Bendy and the Ink Machine. And I'm gonna cover some of them right now. We're about to hear from the greatest minds the internet has to offer. Treesicle fans.
You call them the story you never knew, but literally 99% of the time we already know the story. You're just retelling it in a different, less interesting way. Also, your FNAF theories are bad.
If I know my Ink peeps, I think we're about to get some bomb information about what's going on in Inktown, as well as some premonition-style ideas about what's gonna happen in Bendy Chapter 5. But before I get into theories, I do want to remind you guys to send us your thoughts on Twitter by DMing us. Our channel's Twitter is @TreesicleTeam, and we've got personal ones too, and you can follow us there and tell us your likes and dislikes, your hopes and dreams, and anything you want to. But mostly theories. It's all the fun of online dating with none of the chance of getting laid at the end. This could get interesting. No! Now enough stalling. Let's get into the nice, sweet, juicy details you guys sent us. Hit it! Alright, my dudes, first thought goes to Joseph Baldridge. He wrote, "So I have this theory on Bendy and the Ink Machine that revolves around Bendy having a special power that we aren't aware of. Remember what Chapter 3's Alice Angel, aka Susie Campbell, says about the little devil darling.
Have you met him? The Ink Demon. They say he hears everything. Every creak of the floor. Every rustle of paper. I wouldn't run so fast if I were you. You never know what will draw him in."
This quote right here tells us exactly how the Ink Demon seeks us out, because as far as we know, Bendy is one of the few characters that doesn't have visible eyes, as the ink on his head keeps drooping over his face. Hence the adaptation of advanced hearing. That's probably why in Chapter 4, when we're running from Norman, Bendy suddenly appears. But then this line from after breaking all the Bendy cutouts came to the forefront of my mind.
Now that was fun. Oh, I forgot to mention, he hates it when I do that. I would hide if I were you.
Then suddenly Bendy appeared yet again, even though he didn't hear us. So what's going on? Well, that's Bendy's secret power, his physical and psychological connection to all the Bendy cutouts in the studio. That's why all the cutouts are alive and moving, because they're the one acting as Bendy's eyes. That's how the dancing demon found us in Chapter 2, with one cutout peeking from back to where you entered Sammy's sanctuary, and in Chapter 3, where the demon feels his cutout's presence being torn away from him and storms in to investigate. I know it's not much, it's just a fun little theory I cooked up in my mind. Feel free to talk about it if you'd like. Well, here we are, feeling free to talk about it, and hot damn, Joseph! You may think this is a little theory, but I think you're making some big waves here. A lot of people haven't dove into the specifics of the Bendy cutouts throughout the games. Yet we've seen them move consistently starting all the way back in Chapter 1. So how important are they to the plot? Well, it's difficult to say. On one hand, your theory has plausibility. It gives reasoning to how Bendy shows up where he shows up. On the other hand, Bendy did look us directly in the face in both Chapter 1 and Chapter 4. So it's possible that he can see without eyes because his body is ink, so his eyes would also be ink. So his body just doesn't work the same as ours does. We also have other ink monsters, the Searchers, who don't have eyes yet can still track us just fine within the game. It seems to me that an ink person doesn't necessarily need eyes to see. If Bendy was the only ink creation to not have eyes, then I'd definitely be more inclined to believe your theory. I'm not saying it's wrong, I'm just saying it's less believable because there is another instance of eyeless, or at least not visibly eyed ink creations that can also find us and follow us without any help from creepy cardboard cutouts. I'm more of the mind that Bendy might be able to hear, see, and feel through the ink. We know that he has a unique control over the ink that other characters just don't seem to possess. Alice's monologue regarding getting touched by Bendy's ink tells us that much. Alice says that the ink is a
Buzzing, screaming well of voices.
And if Bendy is able to tap into this well of voices, it isn't a far jump to say he can pinpoint us based on the whispers of the inky beings around us. So I think being in inky areas within Bendy's control must help him know where we are. It's like a hive mind with him at the helm, receiving feedback from the inky beings within his control. Still, I really like that your theory gives meaning to why the Bendy cutouts move, so I'll keep that in the back of my mind for now. Also, what do you think about this theory? It's an idea I hadn't really thought of, so I'd be interested to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. Next, let's take a look at what Achille Amethyst has to say. They wrote, in response to the Chapter 5 Bendy video, since there was a good Alice and an evil Alice and many Borises, why have we only seen one Bendy? Since Henry seems to be eye level with the Bendy cutouts, I think he's turning into a good Bendy. But maybe you've already gone over that idea? I don't remember what influenced my thoughts. If I'm not mistaken, that's actually one of MatPat's theories from his most recent Bendy video. I believe that MatPat made a very strong case to say that we, or Henry, is the good Bendy. And while our Bendy Chapter 4 video did go in that direction, we didn't quite push it to that conclusion. Just because we feel that there isn't really evidence to prove that we are, in fact, good Bendy. But if I'm being entirely candid with you all, it's entirely possible that we are indeed good Bendy. In addition to your observation that Henry seems to be at about eye level with the Bendy cutouts, there's more evidence to boot. Height I don't find very important. Ironic, because I'm a 6'8" giant. After all, Evil Bendy is certainly taller than the Bendy cutouts. He's also taller than Evil Alice, and Alice should be taller than Bendy, at least according to those cutouts. Also, when we do meet Good Alice, we don't really seem to be looking up to either her or Boris, who are both nearly the same height. So it's pretty safe to say that people who become part ink stay close in height to their human counterparts. However, many things point toward us being an ink person. Specifically, details like being reborn through the ink after every death and hearing Henry's voice during those rebirths with a bunch of whispers around him. This lets us infer that Henry is already part of the ink hive mind. We just can't prove for sure that he is in fact good Bendy. But that being said, he might be. And we're likely going to find that out for sure during Chapter 5. The next theory is a pretty long one, so I'm going to be paraphrasing it because otherwise it's going to take up like half this frickin' video. But I'll get to the main points as best I can because it's a pretty interesting one. This theory is by Smashed Pumpkin Soul, or Emily, as she signed it at the end. Let's get into it! Emily wrote, to start off, I believe that everyone in the studio is immortal. If a person in the studio dies, they end up coming back in some way. It would explain why the projectionist appears in Chapter 4 regardless of if you kill him in the previous chapter, and why Bendy didn't cream us in the miracle station after beheading the projectionist. He probably wanted to harvest what he could from him before he came back. A lost one in the balcony in the 4th chapter cries in fear, "He's gonna find me! He always finds me!" I'm assuming he is the ink demon. It would also explain why they're mentally and emotionally unstable. They remember dying countless times, and yet they always end up coming back with the memory. After the inclusion of the new death scene that occurs after Henry manages to get killed, people have speculated that this ink tunnel, or whatever it is the dark puddles. And a lot of people think that Henry is this perfect incarnation of Bendy, but I digress. While I do agree with the assumption that this ink tunnel is the dark puddles, from Alice's exaggerated description,
Bits of your mind swimming like fish in a bowl.
I do not think that Henry is a perfect version of the angry croissant. the ink demon. Wouldn't someone mention something about him being, you know, an ink demon? I think the reason Henry can come back from the dark puddles is because he is corrupted in some way. I think that he looks human on the outside, but is a monster within. I feel like after Henry quit, Joey wanted nothing to do with him and basically tried to erase him from his life. Nobody mentions him in the audio logs. Henry explores the studio starts to remember who he once was and who he's supposed to be. In Chapter 4, Henry gets these disturbances where everything around him is a sunset orange. He can hear a muted, blood-curdling shriek, and everything seems to go wrong. I think Henry is seeing through the eyes of a lost one during these times, as the studio is slowly starting to understand who he is. I do believe that Henry is slowly turning into a monster the longer he stays at the studio, and I do believe that he could become the ink demon. Woo! Woo! Hot damn, Emily! That was almost as long as Grant's Story You Never Knew intros, and I even had to cut a bunch. So let's go through it from start to finish. It seems very likely that there is some sort of immortality created from the ink. We know that Alice has already come back more than once from the ink, and like you mentioned, there's that ink person in Chapter 4 who exclaims that, "He always finds me!" Meaning that Bendy has found him at least a few times already, and it's likely he's come back to life. And of course, we've seen the projectionist return too. So I'm totally on board with you so far, and we went over Henry's death in the last theory, and I'm on board with you there too. It's definitely showing that Henry is part of the ink. Now when you get to Henry not being, as you so perfectly put it, the perfect version of an angry croissant, I'm gonna have to agree and disagree with you. I don't think Henry is Bendy. Yet. But by the end of the game, he very well might be. It's a totally valid observation that no one has said anything about Henry being or looking like Bendy. However, if you recall Alice's Chapter 3 monologue, she was first a shapeless slug. The second time she emerged, she became Alice. This means that Henry, while already part of the ink, doesn't have to be good Bendy yet to become good Bendy by the end of the game. In regards to your final thoughts, I don't think the studio itself is a thinking organism. In my opinion, that title better refers to the ink hive mind. We also discovered in our Bendy Chapter 4 Story You Never Knew that those red filter disturbances, as you call them, are actually happening in real time. We get a disturbance while Bendy is ripping off the projectionist's head, and the head is still there when the disturbance stops, proving that events that happen during those disturbances are actually happening in real time. So we're on the same page for a lot of your theory, but we diverge at the end. I think that Henry isn't Bendy. Yet. Honestly, either is totally possible, but it just seems more likely to me that Henry becomes a good Bendy because we already know the ink machine turns out both good and bad of each character, and we have yet to see a good Bendy to Joey Drew's angry croissant. Overall, fantastic, albeit slightly long theory. Sorry we had to cut it down for time's sake. And that's all I have time for today, but don't stop the video quite yet. If you want us to make another one of these, make sure to send us your questions, theories, thoughts, marriage contracts, or whatever. Just make sure to send them to our Twitter, @Treesicle Team. That's the only place we're gonna be looking for them. If you guys like this and people send in more, we'll do another. And if you're itching for more Treesicle content, you do know we got a second channel, right? We actually stream games on Twitch and then edit them down to the best parts with multiple camera angles and everything.
I feel like the boxcar kids, they never solved real mysteries. It was always just bullshit. Who
And they're
put the
always
purple
whining
dye
because
in the
they're like,
pool?
Whoa.
Like, we
Whoa,
don't have any
bears.
parents. We don't have any parents.
They lived in a boxcar. That was super sad.
Yeah, if you're a bitch.
It's quite the show. I'd highly recommend checking it out. Just click or tap on the video on the left-hand side. That's all for me today. Thanks for watching, everybody. My name's Ryan, and I'll see y'all next time. Toodles, my noodles.